Good evening, everyone. I want to say, a special thanks to each one of you for joining us at this workshop. It is the third and final session for this particular 2025 workshop series, um, hosted by the partnership between Exim Bank and Youth Business Trinidad and Tobago, and it's called Exporting 2.0. We are here at From You Business, and we love to see our young people grow and mature into becoming entrepreneurs that can build a sustainable future. And it's through these kind of partnerships that allows us to continue to make these kind of opportunities happen. So if I didn't introduce myself before, 'cause I think I missed that, my name is Joshua Mangro, and I am the training coordinator at Youth Business Trinidad and Tobago. And today as I said, marks the third one. We had two previous sessions, and it is really, really good to have Exim Bank with us here today. So I know a lot of people will be having other questions to whether they can export, whether you all could, do the things that you all want to do. So I want to take a gauge on everyone right now, and I want you to tell me where you're at. So if you're uncertain about your position to export, I want you to just drop a 1 in the chat. And if you think you're ready and just need that extra oomph, drop a 2 in the chat. Let me just see where everybody's at right now when it comes to exporting. So you have some ones in there. You have any 2s inside there coming in? All right, we have a 2. Nice. All right, so we have people coming to learn, to hear more. Well, one is if you're uncertain and you're not sure about your position to export, and two, if you're ready and just probably need a little more guidance, some more extra oomph to push you on that exporting journey. Awesome, awesome. So we get an idea of who we have in our community here with us on this call with us. So I'm so thankful for this response. It gives us a good gauge for us right now. So let's go into the flow for this tonight session. So you know exactly what to expect. We're gonna firstly hear a brief, impactful message from our partner at Exim Bank, and then I'm going to introduce today's official facilitator, who will gonna take you into a deep dive onto the world of exporting 2.0. And I know you will have questions that comes up. So we have dedicated a live Q&A segments towards at the end. So that'll be a chance to use the raise hand button, ask a question, or you get the opportunity to unmute your mic and ask your questions. But if you do have questions and you can't wait, just drop it in the chat, and we can keep it for that end of the segment, so we can still get some of those questions, or as many as we can, answered by the end of this whole session. All right, so there's also one more thing that you should absolutely stay for, which is we are going to be selecting 5 individuals for a special growth sprint advisory session, which will happen about 3 weeks after this session. And that's going to be a unique opportunity to get personalized guidance from our facilitator. So make sure stay tuned to the end, and to be considered, you must complete the post-workshop evaluation survey that we will share at the end of the segment during the Q&A session, right? So that's enough from me. I want to introduce our representative from our amazing partner, Exim Bank. We want to please welcome Mr. Keegan Barrett, Marketing Research Officer. All right, so the floor is yours, Mr. Barrett.
Thank you very much, Josh. Mr. Cedron Collins, CEO, Youth Business, Trinidad and Tobago, feature speaker, Miss Rachel Renie-Gonzales, participants, good evening, everyone. The Exim Bank is delighted to be a program partner for this Scale with Confidence workshop series, a timely initiative developed by YBTT to equip growth stage entrepreneurs with the knowledge and skills to overcome scaling challenges, engage with industry titans, and utilize insights gained to accelerate business growth to unparalleled levels. The Exim Bank is the country's official export credit agency, and our mandate is to facilitate the growth and expansion of the non-energy sector through our trade finance product portfolio. We offer a diverse range of business solutions tailored to meet the trade finance needs of the business community, and these include advisory services, our transaction-based solutions, which are Forex facilities designed for manufacturers and importers and or distributors of essential items to the local market. Credit-based solutions such as raw material financing, factoring and discounting, asset financing, and the X loan, which is a TT dollar loan with US proceeds for equipment upgrade. Also, the SME financing facilities specifically designed for small business growth. Firstly, we have the SME Forex window, which is applicable for 50,000 USD per month through your primary banker to transact business-related international purchases, and the Catalytic Fund, which provides a customizable financing solution designed to support SMEs at various stages of growth. We have been working closely with our clients and are seeing the continued efforts of various ministries, business support organizations, government agencies, and growth-oriented companies. According to April 2025 release from the Ministry of Trade and Industry, exports from the non-energy sector grew from TT 11.9 billion to TT 14 billion, an increase of TT 2.1 billion or 17%. This growth was driven by the expansion of the manufacturing sector, which consistently accounted for over 90% of non-energy exports annually. Since the launch of our manufacturing forex facility in mid-2018, we have served 190 manufacturers by providing a total of US 1.102 billion in forex support since its inception, and provided over TT 165 million in funding over the last 2 years for equipment to facilitate and support private sector capital investments. Note that 87% of the companies served via the manufacturing forex facility were SME manufacturers. Apart from our core role as the premier trade finance agency, we firmly believe in the value of supporting capacity building initiatives aimed at accelerating business development and fostering the exporter's mindset among our local entrepreneurs. We are extremely happy to partner with YBTT and play a role in building the capacity of our non-energy sector businesses and entrepreneurs through this workshop series. At today's session on Exporting 2.0 Scaling Beyond Borders, you will gain valuable insights and practical strategies from the keynote speaker on how to create a structured roadmap to transform your business from a successful local entity into a resilient and thriving global enterprise. I encourage everyone to actively participate, ask questions, and I do hope that the knowledge you acquire here today will be instrumental in shaping the future of your business. In our local pond, we know every ripple and shadow. It's a comfortable place to swim, but the water is getting crowded. Beyond the shores lies a vast blue ocean filled with endless opportunity. Though the currents are stronger and the journey longer, it's where the biggest rewards, the biggest fish are waiting. I dare you all to cast your nets beyond the familiar. I thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Barrett. We truly value your partnership with your partnership and Exim Bank's commitment to empowering our nation's entrepreneurs. All right, and before I bring our keynote speaker, our facilitator for today, we're talking about exporting. So let me know in the chat where you guys are from so we can know where you all going to plan to export from. Tell me. where in this world are you guys from? If you're from Trinidad, tell me which part of Trinidad. If you're from outside, let me know where you guys are coming from. Which part in Trinidad? Yeah, where? Let me know. Nice. So you see, we are going to be talking about moving from this location. So as Keegan said, beyond that blue waters. So let me bring the moment that you've been waiting for and introduce you to the guide who'll be taking you through Exporting 2.0 Scaling Beyond Borders. Right, Rachel Renie-Gonzales is a 17-year entrepreneur and the co-founder and CEO of the Market Movers group of companies. But beyond the titles, Rachel brings some real-world, down in the trenches experience, and she has taken her brand from a simple operation into now becoming a regional exporter, learning countless lessons along the way. And the philosophy is that exporting is a long-term relationship, as you have, some of you might have seen from our last little publication about exporting. And she's here tonight to talk about real-world stories, the wins, the mistakes, and what it truly takes to take your product and or your service and to succeed globally. So with that, Rachel, we're excited to learn from you, and I hand it over to you. The floor is yours.
Great. Okay, thank you so much. I mean, happy to be here. And I mean, just hearing from Exim Bank and their commitment to investing in sharing this insight, I think is really great. It's something that was very onerous when I started my business. So to see facilitators, to see partners, strategic partners, I sit as a director on the board for YBTT. I love Youth Business of Trinidad and Tobago is where I started. It's the first enterprise that invested in me when I started my business. So I'm just here to share like some real life examples and hopefully, whatever you take from this, it is to apply to your growth strategy. And your growth strategy can be beyond exports, within exports. And export is a very, meandering process. And I will share with you as much my experience and what I've learned, and hopefully you can apply it to your business as well as, make a decision like what's next for your business, what's next for your brand. And hopefully the insight here today will sort of, reveal where you need to go to next. So I'm just gonna share my presentation. So I'm gonna go into, yeah. Okay, so I know most of y'all are here to figure out exporting, and I know everyone tells you to export. It's the next stage of building a brand. You're existing in your local market. You've demonstrated proof of concept. You've demonstrated that somebody likes your product and they want to buy it again. I do like when people put on their cameras because I like to see people. So if you can and you don't mind putting on your camera, please feel free to do so because this is a conversation and I'm hoping to engage everybody. And, now is the time to ask the questions. There's no shame. There's no, I've been through it all. So I think this is more of a conversation for me and how to share what I've gone through and how I can help other SMEs. So being a part of youth business Trinidad and Tobago, I'm passionate about entrepreneurship. I remember being an entrepreneur at 21 and people thinking that's crazy. So I know you're brave, you're here because how I began exporting and how I evolved in my exporting timeline. So we're gonna focus on before we export, I just want to give you all some background on who I am and the background and the business, just to give context so that you understand my perspective and where I'm coming from, so that you can then apply it in your own scenario, right? So I'm the co-founder of Market Movers Limited. Started that when I was 2009. I was like 24 years old. And I just grew up in agriculture. My business partner was from Las Cuevas, fresh fish, seasoning, combining, bringing it to consumers while we were working at the bank. And that's where we started. I started this business in my mom's gallery 17 years ago with $500 TT. So imagine, right? I just knew that people wanted healthy food delivered to their door. And that's how we started Market Movers. We couldn't afford a brick and mortar, so we went online. We then evolved into our moving table, which is a farm to table dining experience. We came offline a bit to engage with customers. David and I just went into agro-processing after, which is Farm and Function Limited. And then Market Movers Design is the company where we help other SMEs with their branding and packaging design and marketability. So I like to eat. I love food. I love local food. I love Caribbean food. And that's kind of where the passion started. And it's evolved over the years into different business models. And now I'm hoping to share how I've learned to navigate this process and hopefully create an ecosystem of, thriving Caribbean entrepreneurs. I just came back from the Afro-Caribbean Investment Forum in Grenada, and I'm just letting you all know the Caribbean has a lot to offer. Africa has a lot to offer. There's a lot of connections, a lot of collaborations, a lot of opportunity. So whatever idea you have within the Caribbean context, I'm hoping that I can help you take that to the next level of export, right? So you're here to learn about exporting. I'm just giving you my background a little bit. Market Movers Online, first e-commerce delivery service in 2009. You could literally buy a breadfruit on the internet and have it delivered to your door. That was my concept, that I wanted Caribbean people to enjoy their ingredients conveniently, healthily. We then went into the farm to table dining, catering aspect of our business, where we felt like we need to connect with customers offline and help them understand why it was important to eat Caribbean food. And that's how deep our storytelling is, right? And then how do we translate that into the export markets? So Farm and Function came about because a customer called and said, their husband was diagnosed with cancer and they needed to make smoothies. I didn't know what a smoothie was. David and I were both like, okay, that's a punch, but healthy, I guess. This was 10 years ago. And what we realized is that, the health food sector, the wellness sector was growing. We decided to cut up these fruits, freeze it for the customer, and we realized her consumption was twice as much because there was no wastage, there was no spoilage. And we compost all our organic matter in the factory. It goes back to the farms. And we've built a agro-processing brand that I'm very proud of, that represents, food security in the Caribbean. It represents, things I like to eat. And out of that, when we grew the brand, all these SMEs that were listed on our website came to us and were like, okay, how did you all grow this brand? So we decided to start a food design studio company where we help other SMEs with their food brands, their packaging, their compliance, just really from their idea to market concepts. And that's the evolution of what we do. We've now helped over 250 SMEs all across the Caribbean with their branding, packaging design, and marketability. And if anybody knows, like David and myself, it's all born out of a passion for local food, and really helping. I had some terrible hairstyles over the years, so please excuse us. But this is to demonstrate, we started this in 2009. You can see the date stamp. This is our first delivery, and it demonstrates how passionate we are about what we're doing in the Caribbean around food. And it's important to tell your story. It's important to be very sure about who you are, about your brand, before you even think about exporting. Because when you go into export markets, it's even more critical. It's like more people looking at it, looking at your product, analyzing what you're doing, and you have to be very sure about who you are. David and I have grown significantly. We recently received the Anthony Sapka Award for Entrepreneurship this year, which is one of the highest, awards for entrepreneurship. We never would have dreamed in a million years that's where we would have ended up. But I just want to share that background part of it so that you understand where my perspective is coming from and why I feel like I can share with you all, how to just sort of get ready for exporting. And once I start the agenda, I'm just going to go through some 5 key points. After each key point, I'm happy to like answer any questions or if you feel like you want to, respond or any way or give feedback, please feel free to do so. But I want to just kind of get across the messaging so that, you can apply this tomorrow. Like these are some real life applications that I think anyone who has a passion about what they're doing can apply it tomorrow. So this workshop is about exporting 2.0, which I was a kind of like hesitating on going back and forth on, am I 2.0 in the export realm, right? And I felt like I wanted to just go through with you guys what exporting 1.0 might look like. Just to assess yourself, prepare yourself, because 2.0 is, what they say, big girl pants and all that. You have to really be ready. And I think giving you some background on how to be ready is important. So the agenda is gonna follow just how I prepared for exporting, and why I chose exporting, our brand. Then optimizing. I'm obsessed with optimizing. I just feel like and even optimizing can be a very slow, rigorous process. It doesn't happen overnight, but you have to be very clear that you need to optimize. You must constantly be thinking about how you improve upon what you built, right? We're going to talk about packaging and labeling, all because, of course, this is what has been the differentiator for us to get into particular markets. Your packaging, your labeling, your compliance, they're all key components of exporting. And I know a lot of people are saying, yes, that's export. But you have to have certain requirements before you even really get into that realm. And then we're going to go into exporting 2.2, finding your growth paths. And that can be very different for everybody else. What I'm going to show you is just my example. It doesn't have to be necessarily yours, but it's how can you take that and apply it and format it to what you are in and where your industry is. And then of course, success factors. I believe in finding like what's the formula or environment that creates success. So that's just some of the tips that I would have learned that has helped me be more successful along my journey in food. So first off, exporting 1.0, I have some 5 quick tips on just how I even like how we approach our export strategy. So the first thing is, of course, researching, with anything you Google it first, right? Somebody messages you, the first thing you're gonna do is Google them. You're gonna figure out, what's the data behind this person, what's the data behind this market. And looking at your local data is usually a key indicator. So my path to export has been regional. Of course, we've been approached by international buyers, all the way to Germany, France, UK, US. But before when you think about that, that's like deep waters, right? So you want to figure out what's that local data? What works in your market? Why do people keep coming back to your product or service? And understanding what that local data looks like. So whatever data you have, you need to be documenting it. You need to be figuring out who's my customer. And I'm going to share a little bit about that. Then looking at your own network, if you're going to export, I'm going to export to Barbados. I literally pull up like the 5 people I know in Barbados. Like, hey, what's going on in Barbados? What's the scene here? I want to export my product. This is just natural data gathering that you should be doing before going out into larger markets. And then of course the support agencies, which is why we're here, right? The fact that Exim Bank and Youth Business of Trinidad and Tobago, they wouldn't, like, this insight is not open, right? You can't Google this. So I think these support agencies that align with what you're trying to do, definitely find the contact, look for who's there, send your product portfolio, send your business profile, whatever you have, to sort of see what opportunities are available for you at the stage you're at, right? So I love to plan. I plan everything. So planning is where your big vision meets small action. So I thoroughly believe that whatever your big vision is, it matters what you do today. It matters what you do in this moment. And it's about matching those big vision ideas that you have for your company and your brand to the small actions that you need to take today, right? And I'm gonna go through some of those actions or just checklists that you should really have as a brand. And then we assimilated, right? We did trade visits. David has done a ton of trade visits. I've done a ton of trade visits. Other business partners within our ecosystem have gone to the countries. You know, take a vacation there, wherever you're thinking of going. If you can't afford it, go there. Like, figure it out, or ask your friend who live in there, what does it feel like? Yeah. So, assimilate, figure out, and there are trade visits. There's trade visits through, TTMA, Exim Bank, there's an anime scheme, but all you have to do is ask, right? Whether or not you can afford to or not, still put it out there, send your portfolio. You never know. There's always a different agency that can maybe sponsor you going on these trade visits. I've gone to sponsored trade visits before. And there's a lot of agencies. So looking at the assimilation, how do you plan on going into this market and maybe just seeing how people live, how they engage, how they shop is important. And I know a lot of us don't always know how to do that, and we're trusting persons to tell us that. But I do think if you can afford to or figure out ways to get into those markets and assimilate, it's important to figure out what's the culture there, right? Of course, tracking, reporting, data comparisons, competitor analysis. And I'm just gonna share just like within competitor analysis, and I have a document here. I mean, this is very personal, but I'm sharing it because I think it's really important to understand your competitor, right? Not to embarrass any other brands, but I have to know where my segment is, right? We're in frozen fruits. I need to know who is my competitor, what price are they selling at locally. If you're not doing this locally, then you're gonna go into an export market and feel very overwhelmed, right? So understanding who your competitor is and what has taught me the reason for comparing your competitor, and it's not really comparing, but it's figuring out what your USP is. Where are you differentiated, right? And the reason I did this was because I had a friend working at another distributor, and they sent me a screenshot of Farm and Function on their competitor analysis. And this was a huge brand. So I was like, okay, if they have me on their competitor analysis and like they literally listed what was my differentiator, why were we better? They understood how were we being competitive in the marketplace. So you need to really go into your competitor analysis. And I know that it may seem like a lot, but I will tell you, just go to the grocery and take a picture. Go to the marketplace, wherever you operate, take a picture of whoever else is competing in that space. And it's not personal. It's just figuring out what did they figure out that you may not know yet, right? Or vice versa. So I was just sharing that competitor analysis just to show you the in-depth of, how far we go into understanding where we operate in the space, right? So I mean, sharing who we are, it's, as I said, from farm straight, we compose, we created this brand, we help other SMEs, and you need to figure out where your competitors are and tracking and reporting that data. And your data points could be different, right? Everybody's different. My data points might be, what is the frozen fruit consumption in Jamaica, right? You have to look at where, what's the data that's going to help you make decisions and move to that next level. And then, of course, finding trends. I believe in trends. So when I say trends, I don't mean like a TikTok dance. I mean, what's the trends in your category? In my category, wellness is constantly evolving. People make smoothies, yes, but really and truly, the next level of wellness is you don't want to have maybe too much sugar in one consumption, right? So how can our frozen fruits evolve and become, you have to really be thinking about what is the trends in your category. And of course, I'm going to be using frozen fruits as the example because that's my category. But please apply it to your own category and where you feel, your ex area is. So just to give some background, we've been exporting, and this slide really needs updates because we've exported much more than this. But it's just to show you that, imagine this idea of like putting frozen fruits in a Ziploc bag and then growing this brand into something that is now exported into other markets. People are enjoying it, having smoothies in the middle of the day conveniently, which is what our vision is, right? And how we've assimilated into, we've done regional export. So we've been able to assimilate into, one of our first export markets was second was Barbados, so how do we, assimilate and grow into there? And I'll be honest, like as we grow and we've learned what works, what doesn't work, but you must test it. It's almost like you have to prove the concept and figure out, okay, does this brand align? Does this distributor align? Does this, influencer align to what you're trying to do? And we've tried literally everything to figure out, how do we push our frozen fruits, right? Aside from that, I'm gonna break it down to the 4 key areas of how we began exporting, how you can apply some of these series into your own export plan. And the first thing I would say is you have to optimize. So whatever you're doing in the local market, streamline it, optimize it, fix it. Because when you export, all is going to be revealed. Like every gap, every thing that you haven't done is going to be revealed. And what does optimizing mean? It means getting rid of the things that don't work, doing the things that do work, being profitable, being efficient, holding true to what your core values are. All these are parts of optimizing your business, right? And with exports, I mean, of course, I'm going to talk about a product. Your packaging and labeling is a big part of exports. If you don't have a product and you have more of a service, you still package and label your service, right? So how is it presented? So just think about that in a service-oriented environment, right? And then we're going to talk about exports, of course, and then some success factors that I've been able to tap into and what environments sort of create those, successful factors. So how do you optimize in today's market? I mean, I'm going to say a lot here. So after I talk about optimizing, if you all have any questions, feel free to put it in the chat. But there's a lot I'm gonna say, and I hope you're taking notes. I know it's gonna be recorded, but let's be real. Let's take some notes and then apply it to your business tomorrow. I want you guys to think about how can you optimize your business when I go through what I did for my business, right? So how do you optimize in today's market, right? So the first thing is understanding your brand. And understanding your brand just means understanding yourself, right? You are the founder of your business. What do you understand about your brand? My brand doesn't compromise on food security. My brand doesn't compromise on sustainability. My brand doesn't, our brand doesn't waste, simple things, right? What is guiding your brand? And that's usually you have to be very clear about that because you're gonna be put in rooms, you're gonna meet distributors, you're gonna meet buyers, and they're gonna want their agenda, right? And you have to understand your brand first. You have to be very clear about it and not compromise on it. There are times when you can compromise, obviously, but not to the point or detriment of the core values of your brand, right? Understanding what industry or sector you're in. This is one of the biggest like learning points I have had where I'm in the frozen fruit category, smoothies, wellness sector. This is not high turnover, right? It's high value. It's yes, it's high quality, high value, but we know that we need to have the right profitability on our products because the turnover is not as high as say whatever's, fast food, right? The slower your food is or slower whatever you're producing is, you have to understand the sector that you're in. So for the frozen fruit category, when we entered, there was no frozen fruit category really in regionally. And it was new. It was for cocktails. It was, so smoothies were very new. So understanding the sector that I'm in is very important. I'm in the freezer. Hands down, if you're in the freezer or frozen section, you know the challenges, right? You have to worry about quality control, if the temperature drops, storage, you have all these other layers, right? So understanding that industry is very important. And the industry could be, if it's cleaning products, what does the industry look like? People want cheap, effective. People want, what industry are you in, as in a broad scope, is important to understand because then you kind of understand the rules that exist in that industry, right? If you're in agriculture, if you're in construction, if you're in whatever category, you understand that there's certain rules that play in that industry, and you have to understand your industry as really well as possible, right? Then once you understand the environment in which you're operating, um, you know, how do you um how do you figure out where you're positioned? And I think that's the most important decision you can make before you enter into export, even if you are exporting. Where's your brand position? Is it less for more? Is it more for less? Is it more for more? And there's templates around this that you can learn about brand positioning, and you should be thinking about where's your brand position. Is it the person who's going to spend a little extra because they know it's a premium product? Or is it you want to make this as affordable and efficient as possible to get to your consumer? You really need to know where you're positioned, and where you're positioned determines how you speak to your customer, determines how you speak to your distributor. It really sets the precedent of I'm a premium product. I cannot be sold for 2-for-1 combos or whatever the case is. And if that is the instance, then it's temporary. It's, you have to be very clear about where your brand is positioned, right? And then, of course, you have to translate that in all your communication, your packaging, your websites, your everything, any way you communicate with your customer, you have to translate that where you're positioned to the right audience, right? Everyone knows you have to choose your target market. Who's the person who comes back and buys your product over and over? That is your target market. Build a profile around that person. I literally have a profile around all our first customers. What does that person look like? The person who buys Farm and Function, she's probably a mom in leggings, going gym, trying to give her kids something good to eat, don't have the time to cut up fruits. A restaurant owner who wants to offer something that tastes better, differentiated, but is super convenient because they can't afford to pay a person to cut up a pineapple anymore, right? So you have to go in really deep about who your customer is and where you're positioned. And understanding that is very important before you even think about exporting, right? So, I mean, this is some of the profiles and and I love visuals because I feel like it's so motivating and it helps your team and yourself even stay focused on, okay, who am I looking for? Who's this person who's buying my product? And you have to get very intimate with what your USP is. Our USP is no additives, no preservatives. Hands down, that blows about 3 other frozen fruit brands out of the marketplace, right? Peak of ripeness, hands down, throws like 4 other brands out of the marketplace because we ripen our fruits in our ripening room. We want the right bricks, we want the right taste. And that differentiation is you have to go deeper and deeper into what your differentiation is, right? We use blast freezing technology, which means we don't have to pasteurize our fruits. If you're pasteurizing your fruits and making smoothies, you're literally just removing all nutritional integrity. And then, of course, we're 100% Caribbean grown. These are things that we're not going to compromise on, right? I've been offered half the price to bring in fruits from some other island in the Philippines, but we won't do that because we believe in what our differentiation is and what our USP is, right? In Barbados, I mean, we've met with different influencers. This is us on the shelf in Barbados. And again, we are competing with Dole, Chiquita. These are businesses that literally owned our ancestors. Like, let's be real, right? These are, and I'm being very frank because you have to understand where you're operating from and what are the competitive advantages that these other brands have. And what's my competitive advantage? That people might feel good if they buy my brand, even if it costs $5 more. They feel better that they're investing in something that's 100% Caribbean, 100% real, supports local farmers, and you have to tell that story and be very clear about what you're telling. When we entered into the Barbados market, we have different smoothie recipes. We name all our smoothie recipes after beaches in the Caribbean. We did that purposefully so that when we go into Barbados, we can now name the smoothies after Sheba, Bim Paradise, Sandy Lane. These are things that the local market can connect with, they can understand. And all I think it's around being as thoughtful as possible to your target audience, right? So I'm going to talk a little bit about packaging and labeling and, compliance and just how that has benefited our brand. And you have to think about your packaging is so layered, right? It's the pack that the consumer gets, yes. It's the box that the handler, the sales rep, the merchandiser might be handling. You want them to understand and you don't have to spend a lot. It's just still about how do you translate your packaging around every layer of touch points that everyone is engaging with your brand. Imagine your distributor, your first order you send, and the box is branded or the packaging is labeled really well. But everything is organized. And I think it doesn't have to be the best or most expensive packaging, but please think about everyone touching, or, it's not just the consumer that's engaging with your brand, it's the buyer, it's the merchandiser, it's the shop owner, it's everyone. And they can tell when something is presented well, when it's presented. And if you're in food, it has to be food safe. It has to, really hold up to a particular standard, right? So your marketability out of your packaging is really your design fundamentals and style, your target audience and marketing strategy. Is your packaging suited for your brand? So we do, pouch packaging, easy, convenient, teddy bag, make your smoothies, put it back in the freezer. It's not a tub. It's not taking up a ton of space. So you have to really be thinking about what is that marketability of your brand looks like through your packaging, right? So applying that packaging to, how does it meet that export standard is really important. And of course, I'm going to give you all insight. So this product is, I mean, it's funny, like when we went into the frozen fruit category, I knew that mixes was gonna be where consumers would ended up like leaning towards because we only had the frozen single fruit in everything, right? Um, but the consumer's making a smoothie. They don't want to buy 5 packs of different flavors and make the smoothie, right? So we decided to launch a mixed bag with pawpaw, pineapple, passion fruits, and mango. And when we looked on the shelf, everything said tropical, but it had strawberries and kiwi and all kind of non-tropical fruits, really. And we wanted something that was truly tropical. We developed this 3 pound size, which is a larger size. We're in Price Marts in the Caribbean, and it's a high performing product. And why we figured out where the consumer was, what value they had when they open the pack, it smells like real fruits. It's, there's all these other our USP. But we made sure our packaging sort of met the compliance. And when your packaging meets compliance, a buyer is way more confident, a distributor is way more confident, a consumer is way more confident. So these are some touch points. You have your brand name, obviously, on your packaging. You have your product name. So Fruition Blends was our product name. The product description, what is it you're selling, which is frozen fruit chunks, right? Product contents and descriptions, the call to action, a good source of vitamin C, claims, and we're launching a new packaging design, new range, new size based on all the experience we've had in both markets, in both local and regional markets. And front of packaging claims. What are the nutrition facts? The consumer, you have 5 seconds to grab this consumer when they pick up your pack, right? The nutrition facts, while it might not be legally required for local markets or even regional markets, the consumer has grown accustomed to seeing nutrition facts, right? We have points like, composting. We compost all organic waste in our factory. And these are points we put a little icon. And these are things that sort of gets the consumer to trust, why they should invest in your product. We have the Proudly TNT, which works in Trinidad, but I would not suggest doing it in other islands sometimes, just because, with the different islands and the cultures and stuff, there's just different stigmas and contexts around that. But you can decide how you want to present it. And then we do like scannable QR codes where the customer can now scan and see a smoothie recipe. And these are really important parts of understanding, who your customer is and what's going to be exciting and next level for your customer, right? We do original photography just because, I love AI. We always make this joke at work about Benjai and, when he says AI, that, are you going to Benjai the scene? And it's important to understand the role of AI in anything you do. I think it's important, but I think it's even more important to be as authentic and real in whatever you represent in your products, whether it be photography, your website, your business card. You really want to have something authentic and real that consumers can, understand right away. You have your place of origin, which you have to put. Where's the product made? Your weights. So weights differentiate depending on the market, certain markets like grams, certain like ounces. Figure that out. It's really simple to figure out what markets use certain measurements or gauges, and you have to know that beforehand, right? Any allergens, any claims, any certified nutritional information, directions, best practices. I love directions because the worst thing you can do is create a product and then the consumer is using it wrongly because all they're going to get is frustrated. So you must put directions. You must put how to use the product. You know how to use the product. The consumer doesn't know. You know, this is a stranger in a new market. You must put those contacts for them to understand, right? And of course, this is all going to be shared with you guys after. And I'm just going to show some examples of branding and packaging design that we would have done through Market Movers Design, just to show how, you know, your packaging is so important. You know, this was one brand. I love AIP Cakes, one of my favorite brands. And, you know, she was going up against Betty Crocker. So there's no way you can do this packaging and really try to compete in an export market against these, you know, the Pillsbury Doughboy and everything else that we've been sort of you know, introduced as the official brand of certain categories. So how do you differentiate? And your packaging is really important in telling that story, right? I mean, everybody loves roti. I felt like when this client came to us, you know, just seeing roti you know, they are now exporting to Miami, you know, different markets. And it's very empowering to see how, you know, investing in your packaging and your branding and your compliance, how it can introduce you to new markets where you can actually be more profitable, where you can be, you know, expand your production, reach your economies of scale. We know there's so many benefits around exports. But of course, you know, they're not going to go into the wrong market. They have to go into a market that understands what roti is, that understands what bus up shut is, that understands what dalpuri is. And, you know, and I think it's important to see how we've helped brands. This is a brand out of St. Lucia. You know, I actually met her at the trade and investment conference, active in Grenada. And, you know, I hadn't physically met her before, but we helped her with her branding and her packaging design. And she was just, you know, to go from this to fully printed, you know, nutrition facts, all that. You know, she's already expressed how she's begun exporting. She's exported to 3 other islands, you know, because she's invested and improved her packaging design. There's another brand out of St. Lucia, you know, just showing how you can evolve your idea into something that can really translate on the shelf. And I mean, everyone goes to the grocery, everyone goes to wherever you sell your products, and you have to be very keen to and aware of like what's, you know, a bottle version of this. And you can shake out, the consumers are accustomed shaking out their, you know, their seasonings and things like that. So you have to understand how to evolve and change your packaging to fit the market, right? I mean, I always use this example because I just think this is a very innovative product out of Tobago. We did their packaging design. You know, it's cereal made out of ground provision. And to see, you know, just an idea, a concept, but now it can be marketed across the Caribbean. Imagine Caribbean people going, wow, I could eat a cereal made with dasheen or coconut grown right here in the Caribbean. And I don't care how nice the idea sounds, and you know, there's persons who will tell you like the profitability, the margins, the cost of production, whatever it is. But you know, there's a reason why there's Swarovski diamonds and why there's, you know, certain, you need to know where you're positioned. And if you feel like your product is really about servicing nutritional value, wellness, food security, then go for it. Just market it right and make sure that your packaging relates that, right? We're going to share a little bit about, you know, success and just sort of packaging all of this together. It's weird. Like I can't just say like do XYZ and you'll definitely succeed in this. What I'm sharing is more what I've learned through my own brands and how can you sort of apply it in your own way, right? So the first thing you have to do is really take what's special about your brand and then amplifying it effectively across export markets. So whatever export market, and I can get really technical, of course, you can do data, you know, what's the consumption, and there's services like when I went to Greenland, and I keep talking about it because it was just really such a great experience. You know, there's Wisdom CRM, which is a platform that sort of helps SMEs find out where their consumption is, and I'll share that after with you guys. I met with the business owners and just, how they were promoting their brand and how they expanded. And it's really interesting, but you have to know what's special about your brand using the data. We recently were about to export to Jamaica, and they only have like large bags. They love value for size. And imagine in Trinidad we're like down to 44-gram size because we want to be competitive and price conscious, right? Because price sensitivity is important. But in certain markets, bulk sizes. So you have to be thinking about, what is special about your brand, how are you going to amplify it, and then how are you going to translate that across different markets. So I love this saying, which is your brand is your voice and your product is your souvenir. So your brand is really like who you are, what you define, and what we spoke about earlier. What are the, pillars? And I would have shared that in different workshops before. But what are those pillars that hold up your brand? Is it sustainability? Is it local? Is it high quality, premium? Is it whatever it is? But that has to be very clear. And then your product has to sort of reflect what that vision is, right? This is just a video of me telling my brand story, and I didn't start out being really good to like express that. But I'm gonna show you all just through our brand how we sort of really position ourselves, have a clear understanding of where we're positioned and how we want to take it to the next level. So I'm just gonna share this video really quickly just to share some insight on how we share that story.
I'm Rachel Renie, and I've been an entrepreneur for 13 years. And I started out in the service industry, food service, Tea Market Movers Limited. And we wanted to create a physical product, something that represented what our brand was about. And that's how Farm and Function came about. We're the only local frozen fruit product on the market, grown 100% in Trinidad and Tobago. And our packaging, all our inputs are locally sourced. The smoothie sector, the health food sector, it really took off in the last 5 years. And we saw an opportunity. On the shelf only had the imported berries, it only had all the imported fruits, and we wanted to offer Caribbean people something grown and made just for them. At Farm and Function, we seriously pride ourselves for local. Choosing the pouch company was important to us. It was a local manufacturer of flexible packaging, and now we can safely and confidently say that 100% of our inputs are local. The fruit is local, the packaging is local, which is why we went to the pouch company. You're not just talking to a consumer anymore. You're talking to buyers, you're talking to vendors, you're talking to importers. There were instances when we would just mail our empty packages and we would be approved to be listed in stores just based on the packaging. They didn't have to get the physical product, which is a quick sell for us. I'm Rachel Renie.
So I hope you all heard that, and I'm just gonna go in a little more into our brand and just sort of being really clear. And when I said positioning and understanding, all those things, like how we use that to tell our story. So this is one of the ads when we got into Barbados. The first thing they asked was, do you have a radio ad? Do you have a billboard ad? And these are things that you have to be considering and factoring in, but of course, still aligning with your brand course. So I'm just sharing the video to show you guys. So, that's from like digital ads to your website. How many of y'all have a website? Even if it's just a landing page, honestly, if you go on Farm Functions page right now, I will show you. We're actually refreshing our website. So even if you're fixing things, you can still translate and make sure that it's communicated to your customer, right? So from our email marketing, we do digital email marketing. there's Zoho, there's MailChimp, there's anyone who's engaged with your brand, you should be communicating with them digitally on some platform, right? Social media is not the only channel to communicate with your customer. Emails, social media ads, yes, Google ads, your website to your personal sales process. You have to be thinking about all the layers in which you're speaking to your customer, right? Social media, as I said, reflecting again what your voice is, where you stand. And then what's most important is your revenue channels. All that is nice, but all I care about is who am I selling to and within which channel, right? So I'm selling to the everyday smoothie maker, which is where you show someone live making or using your product, and the range and what they can expect, right? Then we have restaurants. So we service anywhere from like large smoothie operations like Smoothie King to small mom and pop shops. You have to know all your channels, right? So we're not only doing retail, we do food service as well. But we have communication that is geared specifically towards those food service and restaurant owners. And then most importantly is our farmers. Our farmers is a big part of our story. So we have to make sure that we are, communicating along that channel and telling those stories and reiterating what our differentiator is, right? And then if you go on the shelf, you go in the grocery store, you see our products, it translates. And it took a long time to get here. We are even facing challenges all the time around freezer space and imported products. And, it's a constant battle. But I love seeing this picture on the shelf because you need to show your distributor, your buyer, anyone, how your product should be presented anywhere you go, right? And, this can be from your shelf layout, there's different terminologies around it, but really it's about how do you want your product to be presented on the shelf, and you have to think about that layout and translate that to your distributor, because your distributor may not understand just the placement, how the layout should be, and you have to be very clear about that, right? When we do sampling, we promote it, yes, originally here, and then we obviously take pictures on the trade when we're doing the sampling and promotion. We do partnerships with other brands like, yogurt brands and different stuff. And yes, they may be imported, but they have that brand strength. So the affiliation and the piggybacking off of brands that are already established and brands that align with what you're doing, right? So of course, yogurt aligns with frozen fruit and smoothies. So we would have done that sort of collaboration with them. Just to show you just how the portfolio has evolved. And, we're now doing so when we looked at the marketplace, it was a green smoothie, it was a tropical smoothie, and it was a berry smoothie. And we were like, how do we translate that into a local context, right? And we'll be launching soon a green mix, which is made with local baby spinach, kale, ginger, and pineapple. We have the berry mix, which is the dragon fruit, and then we have the tropical mix, which is our Frisian Blends Original. So you must be looking at your categories. Where is the consumer? What does the consumer want, right? So these are important parts. This is me in Barbados. I literally had to personally go train the staff, do the promotions, sell the product, teach them why it's important to promote, right? And you have different distributors, and it could be very daunting, but it's very necessary. When you do your data research, you figure out if the market is aligned to where your brand is the category developed enough? And then when you go there, make sure you do a good job. Do not, you can't just put your brand into someone else's hand and expect them to be as motivated or functional as you might be, right? And you have to make sure that you go there and you translate that and you tell that story. And I mean, this is an example I love to use, which is things go wrong. And you always have to prepare for things going wrong. Like sometimes people say I'm like, always contingency planning, but you have to think about when things go wrong. And this is an example, right? This is one of our products. When the grocery freezer goes down and they don't fix it in time, our pineapple oxidizes and turns into this color. So what do? Did we blame the grocery? No. We told consumers this is what your pineapple should look like. If you buy a pack and it looks like that, please contact us and we'll replace that pack right away. And recall, especially if you're in food, what's your contingency plans when you enter this market, right? I just wanted to share this nice bowl of fruit to get that image out your mind. But just to show you, where do your customers exist? Like our customers are into fitness, wellness. They rather drink a smoothie than a soft drink, right? So you have to find out, when you enter these export markets, where the fitness groups. You all would have seen our influencer before. She's into fitness and all that because you want to align with where your brand is positioned, right? And these are some of the lessons that I would have learned over the years. And I purposefully left my presentation sort of open, short-ish, because I think the Q&A part and you guys asking, feedback, of course, we have the consultancy after with the brands that are selected. So I'm going to share with you all as much as possible based on your category, based on where you're at. And I really want to hear from everyone, where do you feel you're at in terms of exports? I mean, I could give you all the technical terms and there's there's all these agencies that exist that can provide you with that. What I'm sharing here is really real life data. And the first thing I would say is that relationships matter. So when you find the market, you did the research, of course, you know where you're positioned, you're clear about your brand story, you send your portfolio, what's that relationship with your distributor? And you have to be very clear right off the bat. I think I have a distributor profile now where it took a long time to get to that point, where it's almost like dating, right? You have to know, does this distributor align with my brand? Does it align with where I'm going? And you have to make sure and set those systems in place. So how does the distributor report to you? Who are the key retailers or key accounts that exist in the market? And what is their relationship with these key accounts, right? I'm in frozen. So the first thing I do is ask how much frozen storage do you have, right? What's your capacity? Do you have, and you have to be able to match and align and build those relationships, right? And then, of course, the customer, because all that matters is that you engage with the actual customer because it's not a distributor. Yes, they're buying it. But it's the customer that's going to, in the end, say, I feel like I can relate to this brand. So you need to understand what those relationships are going to look like at every level. So for distributors, we set recurring meetings. We set data outputs. What is the data that we need them to supply us with? And I'm saying this, you can have all that and the key players may not have that structure in place, but it doesn't matter. You can still push, you can still set that precedent and say, okay, I want my reporting monthly. I want my reporting bi-weekly. Those relationships are very important. And what that means is you have to spend time with this person. You have to set that recurring meeting. They have to understand your portfolio. They have to understand when you're going to launch a new product, when, what are the occasions in the marketplace. So we learned, Independence Day in Trinidad is not Independence Day in Barbados, right? So you have to translate all those occasions, all those activities into the market that you're looking to go into, right? And I think no two export orders are the same, mainly because, when we first started, our export orders look like somebody realized this product and somebody took it in a suitcase and went back with it, right? That's our first forte, everybody foray into export, right? Somebody abroad bought it and you send it up. That has evolved into, us sending a pallet of stuff consolidated on an ice cream container. And one of the things that I used was our local distributor here. They also exported and they do ice creams. I looked at who were the distributors in other markets, and I reached out to those distributors and said, hey, we have a frozen fruit product too. You're already buying from this brand. And these are ways that you can create inroads into new markets. Of course, you're starting out with just a pallet. And I think if you don't have the volume initially, when you launch a product, it's really, they want to see who bites, right? It's more of a pilot, it's more of a test and trial. But when you're ready to launch into a market, you need to have, enough stock. You need to have who the key accounts are, make sure you can stock them. What is your marketing strategy? What are the trade deals? What are the trials that's going to happen around the product? Because whatever you're selling, people need to experience it on some level, right? And I think no export order is the same. I've done from, as I said, single orders to pallets to full containers. And even with that evolution, it's understanding that do not take for granted that every order is different. So if you find your distributor or someone is buying a certain amount, you already know how quickly you have to move it, right? If you're moving a container, your shelf life is 12 months. You have 6 months to really sell off and move this product, right? Because you don't want to be close to expiry. And these are mistakes and challenges that we face in different markets. Of course, your compliance, your documentation, your updating, your free sale certificate, you must have whatever compliance. And for instance, Barbados, aside from the free sale, which already exists and it translates, you have to have a health certificate. So every market is very different. And you need to know what those compliance and standards are. We also support on how to figure out that in your free sale with food. But whatever compliance you need, and compliance can be your IP as well. We've done things like apply for IP in different markets. So, there's so many support agencies that can help you with that. But figuring out what is that compliance, right? And not taking for granted that, what works in Trinidad will not always translate in another island. And then, of course, brand strengthening, which is don't get lost in translation. So the example I showed you guys with, naming the smoothies after local beaches, these are all things that can translate into different markets. But knowing, how to, strengthen your brand across all those channels. And lastly, I think timing is everything. The fact that you all are here shows that you're eager, you're open. Somebody said you should export. And I think, coming out of the conference recently, someone used an example of like a big local brand in Trinidad that, only 10% of their sales is local, 90% of their sales is exports. And that kind of woke me up. I was like, okay, if this brand is huge locally and this is only 10% of their market, this kind of gave me this hope that, okay, there's a lot more market to sell to. And we can feel bogged down in our own market sometimes, any challenges that we face here. But I think export can be a real opportunity to expand to scale, to expand, to grow, but also to figure out, understand too that in those markets, you're most likely more profitable, right? So you're pricing the value of what you're offering going into that market. We're going into Barbados that, doesn't import a lot of their fruits. So to get real frozen pawpaw to make their smoothies, these are all, you have to understand where your value is going to be in those markets, right? So I think timing is everything. I think, as I said, you guys being here, it's about assessing, are you very clear about where your brand is? Are you very clear about where you're positioned? Are you very clear about where you're not going to compromise? And then sort of build those relationships, look at the data, find out where the consumption is. I thoroughly believe in consumption. You know, we've entered into markets where the consumption was low or the market had a lot of fresh fruits available, so we assume they might want it. But you have to look at where your category is being consumed. And for frozen fruits and smoothies, it's a specialty category. So I have to be very conscious of, you know, someone said recently in Guyana, there's all these cafes popping up because, of course, you know, there's oil money and there's these opportunities. So you have to be looking at, okay, in a cafe, a smoothie, it aligns, right? And I think you have to really be observing, you know, what's happening in that market. I was kind of anxious doing this presentation because, you know, with what's going on globally and what's happening, you know, you can feel very threatened trying to get your product out there. But I think it's important to still know, once you know where you lie, your differentiator, your USP, it would be important to know, okay, where the opportunities are in those markets. And for nostalgia goods, for Caribbean goods, and I know there's a lot of Caribbean brands here. You know, I was on a panel in Miami around food security recently, and you know, like FedEx is talking about, oh, they added 2 more planes to ship goods from Jamaica because nostalgia goods have grown so significantly. So understanding that there is opportunity in the market for Caribbean goods, but you have to be very mindful about where you place yourself and being prepared before you go into those deeper waters. So I hope I know I shared a lot. And it's a lot of real life experience, and I have a lot more that I could possibly share. But I just felt like I wanted to touch on, you know, what my exporting experience has been, and that I'm still hopeful and I'm still excited to see how we can get Caribbean made products across the region, globally as well. You know, we did different programs and have been, you know, approached by companies in Germany doing specialty marmalades that want Caribbean fruits, and it's all exciting, right? But what do you need? You need a compliance, you need your brand strength, you need to be really sure about where you stand. And I think the first thing to do is to look internally. How are you existing in the current market that you're in? And then how can you now strengthen that and apply it into different export markets? So I'm happy to like do a Q&A. I know I finished a little bit kind of good on time. But I really wanted to open up enough space, Joshua and Shadran, to like really hear from the entrepreneurs, because I know why you all are here, why you're giving up your evenings. And I will say that, you know, there's opportunity, and I hope I can help you guys navigate some of that.
All right. Rachel, thank you. That was quite a lot. Thank you for sharing and breaking down such a complex topic with clarity and real world examples, you know. So
Yeah.
for the people in the audience, let's just give Rachel some support, put some fire emojis in the chat, just show your support for everything she has shared, because she has done quite a lot for us this evening.